This podcast is sponsored by SuccessDay, an HR IT consultancy firm.
Hi, my name is Dirk Jonker, or Data Dirk, and I'm the founder and CEO of Crunchr People Analytics. Welcome to the podcast, Meet the Mavericks.
Hi, I'm Anne Jaakke, and this is Meet the Mavericks, an HR tech podcast by SuccessDay. In this series, we interview CEOs and founders of new, innovative HR tech solutions. We get to know what drives them and what their products or services are all about. Hopefully, this podcast brings inspiration to the HR community, celebrates entrepreneurial mavericks, and closes the gap between HR and tech. In this week's episode, we're joined by Dirk Jonker, founder and CEO of Crunchr, an intuitive people analytics platform that pulls data from various systems to tell you the story behind the data. It creates one source of truth to answer all talent questions in seconds. Besides his business, Dirk is passionate about educating and inspiring the next generation of HR professionals. He lectures and teaches at various universities on business transformation and public analytics. And he's a board member who shares his expertise with various HR tech startups. Welcome to the studio, Dirk.
Thanks very much for having me, and I'm super looking forward to this conversation.
Oh my gosh, I knew that, the last time that we spoke, I was still meeting you online.
Yeah.
And you will tell me shortly where did you fly in from. But I'm so excited that you came all the way to the Netherlands to kind of
course,
have this conversation. So first of all, where are you normally based?
I live in Boston.
In Boston?
Yeah, with my family. And pretty cool city, in the northeast of the US, close to the ocean, very green, exciting.
When did you move to the US?
This was December 22. Yeah.
And that was a permanent choice because before that you were traveling back and forward, or was that like immediately turning into a permanent gig?
Actually, it was to expand my company. So we're headquartered out of Amsterdam, and the US market is super booming. So it was moving there to develop the US market.
And as the founder, we're going to talk a little bit about the company in a second, but you got to choose which city you were going to base your US headquarters.
Yeah, exactly.
So why Boston?
Well, I really wanted to be close to the Amsterdam operations. So East Coast would be preferable, with time zones and flying over. And then there's a couple of big cities. If you go from the northeast to the southeast, it's Boston, it's New York, Philly, Washington, maybe the Carolinas, Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed Boston because you have great access to talent. You have MIT, you have Harvard, you have BU. It attracts a lot of innovation, a lot of tech startups. So, I
must have
Boston.
been a key milestone to kind of say, I'm going to open my US headquarters. That must be so exciting.
It is fantastic.
Yeah,
this is really entrepreneurship on steroids.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just a quick moment to talk about your family, because you just mentioned them.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about your background and your family nowadays.
Yeah, so I grew up in Groningen, which is in the northeast.
The most beautiful city of the Netherlands.
Oh, the most beautiful city, except for Amsterdam for me.
Yeah.
As a small kid, I looked up at Amsterdam. I was a big fan of Ajax. So every summer we would go with the family to Amsterdam. And so despite the fact that Groningen is very comfy, very warm, beautiful nature, I basically found a uni in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
And enjoyed their life very much, 6 years. And then Amsterdam started to feel very small. And then after 6 years, right after I graduated, I packed 2 suitcases and went to New York, where I lived for 5 years.
Wow. And what did you do in New York?
I relocated for the company I was working with, Towers Perrin back then. So now it's called Willis Towers Watson. So this was HR consulting. I was really, really interested to learn how big companies work from the inside, and especially the role of HR.
Which comes in handy nowadays.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And at the other hand, I also had a big dream to really understand how big companies work and if we could use data and analytics to make them win in the market.
Perfect bridge to talk about your company, Crunchr HR.
Yeah, Crunchr.
Crunchr.
Yes.
I pronounced it incorrectly.
Well, there's many ways you can pronounce it, but it's...
So it wasn't necessarily pictured to have HR as the target group to sell it to? Or was it more about people?
Well, that's a great question. When I just moved to the US and relocated with Towers Watson in their global consulting group, I really liked it because the type of work that I was working on was very broad. It was from actuarial consulting to restructurings. And I was working there for half a year, I think, and then something happened in the world. It was the start of the global financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And being in New York was quite interesting back then.
At the center of it.
Exactly. Yeah. This was the place where basically 500 meters from our office, people at Lehman Brothers were packing their boxes. I saw it happening. And at the same time, what we also saw with our clients was that companies had to make really big and really complex decisions in a very short amount of time. And all these decisions were impacting people and organization. And the curious thing was that HR was not part of any of these discussions. At the moment of crisis, it was basically the CEO and the CFO calling the shots. Mm-hmm. And I was puzzled. I really didn't understand why, because all the decisions were impacting people and organization. The cost is typically in people and organization. So I would have thought that the HR director would be an integral part of this. Mm-hmm. That was basically my start of workforce analytics. Yeah. Because I saw that despite the fact that there was a lot of passion with CHROs back then, a couple of things were really well developed. You know, how to build a culture, a performance culture of winning. And other things were less developed. Strategy consulting, using data to your advantage. And I thought, there's an opportunity. I'm in New York. Yeah. I'm going to quit my job and start my own company. Wow. And that was my first company.
So that has been the pivotal moment, more or less, for you to kind of come up with the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, I would agree, an absolute blind spot for most companies and also most HR teams still today. Obviously, we do have some HR change makers that have it in place, but still a lot of companies are still struggling maybe to extract the data into the systems that they already have, but in short, to utilize proper, reliable data in any of their discussions. But you're going to tell me all about it, but I'm just recognizing this from my own days in HR and working with CHROs in the Netherlands.
Yeah, because you were a CHRO yourself.
Yeah, and I think when I think back about that period of time, it's more than 4 years ago now, but today I'm still working with a lot of CHROs, so I do think it's still relevant. But most of the information that you're getting are from your people systems. And if you have more than one system, it already becomes more problematic. Yeah. And you do not always trust the data. And then when you have the data, how do you analyze it? And
oh my goodness, this is our sales pitch.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Please go on. This is better.
This is really what I have been experiencing, right? And then,
I totally feel your pain.
From the content perspective, I do get that you're kind of hoping, as a CHRO, what you're kind of hoping is to push one button and to actually get a spreadsheet that you can read, visually understand, and not having all these 1,000 standard reports that are generated that you cannot understand anything of. Yeah. And how to map it with other information. Yeah. So, but
you're
anyway.
So spot on.
So this was your idea already years ago, and now fast forward to today. How big is your business? What are you doing? What type of clients do you have? How many people do you employ? Can you tell us a little bit about the numbers?
Yeah, sure. So Crunchr is headquartered in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we have about 60 people, 60. We have an office in London and now an office in Boston. And it's I think that we will end up at 100 people at the end of this year. And we work typically for companies who have 1,000 employees or more. The sweet spot is really, between 5 and 25,000 employees, I would say. But we do have a lot of companies smaller and a lot of companies bigger. But the thing that brings them together is basically HR leadership that has a plan, wants insights to build the plan, to monitor the plan. And exactly as you said before, struggle with the fact that data is in so many different places, and the data are not really insights, and there's a bit of a capability gap maybe in the field of what to do with the insights. So that is what we do. And then, we work for really cool companies from Booking.com, Randstad, AkzoNobel, Qualtrics. It's getting quite exciting. We grew almost 100% last year in the US.
I almost want to say it sounds like the American dream.
It is the American dream.
Living there, 100 people almost on board. I read somewhere that when you're an entrepreneur, that the shift between more than 15 to 50, hiring between 15 and 50 of your own staff members, that is one of the most difficult periods in any business. Did you experience that as well?
I think so, because if there's one thing that I learned is that building your business is as much as about building yourself. When you really start and you're with a couple of people, you do everything yourself, and you really have a can-do mentality. You know, if you need to mail something, you go to the postal office and you do it. If you need a contract, bam, you write it. And at the moment that you have 15 people, you start to get people that, can help you to build a business. And that is when the art of delegation comes in.
You learned that.
I learned it, yes. And because I started really early in my career as an entrepreneur, I think I worked only for a boss for like 2 or 3 years. You never really had someone who was coaching you or who was teaching you how to do it. I mean, it's basically do it yourself and build your own company. So we built a bit of an own culture. And in the beginning, you need people who are super hands-on, do everything. But as you are growing your company, this starts to limit. Mm-hmm. And then, even though you would have in your mind like, hey, this task is so super small, I can do it faster instead of instructing others to do. Or it's so complex that no one else can do this as good as I am. These are all traps, that your ego is laying for you, just to make sure that you keep control. But the more you do that, the less skill, your company gets. Yeah. And that was one of the learnings.
This is something that I really admire in entrepreneurs, having had my own little journey there as well. And we just talked about it before we got into the podcast recording, so to say. Yeah. But you just mentioned that you've always kind of been an entrepreneur. Now, my question to you is, do you think you can, from a DNA perspective, move from being having a corporate DNA to having an entrepreneur DNA, or is that something that is already with you and then you will never work for a company again?
Oh, I think that entrepreneurs can work for larger companies, and people with larger companies' DNA can become an entrepreneur. I think there's other things that are success criteria. One is your super drive. You have to be super passionate about what you do. If you are not passionate, then and you just want to build a company, for example, then you won't have the energy to sustain.
Yeah, good point.
So this could happen in a small company and a larger company. I think there's a couple of benefits that people from larger companies have because they understand how big companies work, how they operate, how they think.
Yeah, so if you work for an entrepreneur like yourself and you come from a big company, you can kind of know how to pitch the product at this big company. We're definitely going to talk about that because I know that has been a challenging experience for most HR tech companies to sell
totally
to HR.
Understand. Yes.
So I want to learn a little bit about what your view is regarding that. When you look at the journey of Crunchr in the last couple of years, were there certain key milestones, one of them being obviously, I think, moving to the US, but what were some of the milestones that you had?
I think there were a couple of milestones, and it all relates to the phase where you are. So imagine going to the Chamber of Commerce and starting your own company. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, that's huge. It's huge back then. Mm-hmm. Right now, I mean, you sign tons of agreements every single day. But back then, it's huge, and you should be proud. The next moment for us was, I think it was at the HR Tech trade show in Amsterdam, 2015. This this was right before, everything started to happen in Amsterdam. So it was at the RAI, at the exhibition center. And there were a couple of very big booths. It was the start of Workday a bit in Europe. It was Oracle. It was SuccessFactors, SAP. And there was a tiny little booth of Crunchr.
With all your savings saved up for this moment.
Exactly. And we had a line in front of our booth. People were very curious. That was a milestone back then.
Yeah.
So you build something and you feel there's a market.
Mm-hmm.
Another milestone is when you get your first, investments. We didn't have much revenue back then, but Randstad made a very significant investment in the company. And later on, Nationale Nederlanden, and later on, a British VC.
How did you do that, by the way? Because most of the startups, this is one of their biggest challenges, finding the investment.
Yeah.
And these are, some serious, parties that you managed to contract.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Because just by yourself, you woke up one morning and then...
Yeah, I think, of course, in hindsight, you can say, I did all the right things. I guess it's a good chunk of luck, but you can create a bit of your luck.
Yeah.
That's also what I believe. So it starts with a real passion. So if I walked from my home to my office, I passed by, 10 square miles of hospitals. Boston is very much known for excellent medical care and research. If I would ask any researcher there, what is your dream? They don't say, I want to become the best researcher in the world or the richest entrepreneur in the world. They say, I want to cure cancer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This passion is incredibly important to build your founding team. And the first people that need to be excellent. Not just good, but excellent. And with a team of excellent people, and also a team of people who maybe don't know the space that well, you come up with new ideas, new views on the market. And then it is a bit about, the hustling culture as a CEO, as a founder. You need to hustle. There's no playbook. But a founder, just like yourself, you will find ways to get it done. It's very important to juggle, to be able to juggle with, dual strategies. So we have a short term, like we need to build a product, but we have a long term, we need to get funding. And the art of juggling between the short and the long term is very important. And then again, it's about networking. It's about meeting the right people, having the ambassadors, building a bit of brand. Everything has to come together. And then, again, a bit of luck.
A bit of luck.
Yeah.
So do you already now have a new milestone in mind? What would be your next milestone?
To get a big-ass investor on board in the US.
And do what with that investment?
To really grow in the US market. So
to roll it out.
Yes, exactly. So the first phase is always to seek product market fit, which is basically you have a product, there is a market that you want to sell into, and this market needs to fall in love with your product because it really solves a very must-have problem.
Is it different in the US than in the Netherlands?
There are quite some differences. I mean, the funny thing is that, companies are companies in the world. Every company in the world collects more or less the same data around people. Who are you? What's your age? What do you earn? Who you report into? What's your job title? But the questions and the culture around it is very different in the US. So, for example, in the US, and this is my personal hypothesis, because it is quite easy to get fired from a job, you basically have a very short shelf life. Mm-hmm. So you land a job as an HR leader, and you basically have 2 or 3 years to make it happen. And otherwise, you're out. Mm. So people there take more risk. And
they want to immediately show some muscle when they get hired in their first 100 days.
In the first 100 days, the 100-day plan is crucial. So they're very much open to innovation. So not only to our space, but also to other parts of innovation. You just shared a very nice story, how you also embraced innovation in your CHRO role. That is the mentality of the US. And therefore, in the US, it is quite easy easy is not the word, but people are more receptive to try new things.
Well, how do they deal with their IT infrastructure, their IT counterparts in their companies? Because I believe that in a lot of situations in the Netherlands when we work within HR, it's not necessarily that the HR change maker doesn't want to create change, but they have the feeling, if it's real or not, that's to be discussed, that it's very difficult to overcome the battle with IT or with data or cybersecurity, procurement, and so on to make it happen.
Yeah.
How is that different in the US?
I think there's a certain order in mind. So, first of all, HR needs to have a plan. Needs to have a goal where they want to grow into and a strategy to get there. So, for example, tech companies, they really struggle to retain talent. They really struggle to retain sales talent. HR there is very capable of making cases that if they could potentially reduce the staff turnover by a bit, then these are the business outcomes. And once you have the business hooked and you show them that there is potential for them to sell more or reduce cost, then IT follows and then procurement follows as last.
So they use the data to build their business case.
Exactly. So selling Crunchr, for example, is not so much about selling the technology because people see it and they say like, oh, finally, it's super easy to get insights. But it's about building the business case. And this is difficult. Why? Because often, unfortunately, HR are not part of the executive committee. They don't really maintain their own budgets. They are sometimes being, taken hostage by IT and by finance. But to get to the table, you need insights. And once you are at the table, you have budgets to create insights. Yeah. So it's a bit of a circular reference.
So how do you break the vicious circle, of the vicious circle, so to say?
With small experiments. So with pilot projects that you really define like, hey, this is not going to cost you a lot of money, but we're both going to make some investments. Small investments to prove that we have a business case, that we can prove we can create value really fast. And then the trick is that HR doesn't say, I want to buy Crunchr, but that HR starts to map down their requirements. So they say...
all the information that they want to have.
Exactly. So, for example, this is the problem that we have. We quantify this problem as a $5 million problem. Every month that we don't have our insights will cost another $300,000. This is what we need to solve this problem. IT, we don't care if we buy a product or if we build something ourselves, but this is what we need. And then if you go with those requirements to your own IT team, then typically they start to see, oh, hang on, this is more than just a Power BI dashboard. We need this, they need that. They have all kinds of weird authorizations, and they need it in 2 months, and this is their budget. Yeah, come on.
We're not able to do it.
Exactly.
So advice, first make an inventory of all the information that you actually would like to have, ask IT to deliver it to you, and then when there's any challenges there, then come up with a pilot type of project to actually see what Crunchr can bring to the table to solve this problem. Yeah. And then start talking about the roadmap to actually utilize it on a permanent basis.
So it's super important to fall in love with the problem first.
Yeah.
And only then start to think about, and how are insights going to help me? And then how am I going to get the insights? And where do I get the insights from?
Hey, Dirk, I just know, because I just know how the HR teams are thinking. When you just mentioned these particular questions that you might have on data, I assume, having been in your business for 10 years or so, that these questions are quite common across the world.
Correct.
Is there a list or something that you can show in the show notes of the podcast so that actually people that are interested can have a look at these are the type of questions that you actually would like to have as a standard HR department, want to have insight on?
Oh, absolutely.
Like as a teaser also to have a think about what are the typical data points. Obviously, we all want to know how many FTE and headcount, and even that in some organizations is challenging. I know because I come from a background where we actually rolled out in 13 countries and had 13 different payroll providers. So
therefore, I feel your pain.
We could only get the amount of headcount on a day that nobody had a public holiday and everybody was at 8:30 at the phones.
Yeah.
But over time, the data that we're using is way more intelligent, or we want to get our fingers on more intelligent data. And most importantly, I think to also utilize data to come to certain analysis or conclusions even more than just the flat number, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the accelerations that I would advise companies to take a look at is, for example, the CSRD reporting. So this is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that has come into law already January this year. And this basically states that for most companies in Europe that have at least 500 people, they have to produce their first CSRD report in 6 months from now. In the CSRD report, it's going to be a public disclosure on how your business is impacting people, the planet, and society. And there are a few chapters in this report. And just the guidance for the HR directive, so for the HR report that they need to publish, is already 161 pages with instructions. These are all questions around, do you pay people an adequate wage in the world? So not minimum wage, but adequate wage, which basically means can people live from an income? These are questions around health and safety. These are questions around equality. These are questions around many different things. So the cool thing on earth is that many companies have to already report in 6 months. So this could be...
is a good argument in the boardroom to invest in it, and a good teaser to get your product on the shelf.
In France, so now at this moment, I think it's up to July, so in the next couple of days, that the countries have the time to implement this into their national law because it's a European directive. And France already said executives that really ignore the CSRD reporting, they go to jail.
Wow.
It is now
That's a nice sales pitch for you to kind of come in as the CEO of Crunchr. Listen, mate, if you do not use our product, you might go to jail.
Exactly. So that's more like the stick. But there's also the capital markets that become really, really interested in how the company is doing good for people, planet, and society.
But what do you notice? I mean, the companies that have been working with you, let's disregard them, but most of the market, how big a percentage of the markets you do not do business with yet have this data in-house?
Many companies have, I would say 80% of the data in-house, but it's, as you said, in tons of different systems. And the pandemic really accelerated this.
So the biggest challenge for the teams is to actually bring it to one source of truth.
Exactly. Connect it. And then translate all the data points into insights that are relevant.
And what do you mean with insights that are relevant? You have some examples.
Yeah. So imagine that you have, for example, monthly payroll data. That's the easiest example that everyone has. Everyone runs payroll. So imagine that you have 36 sheets in Excel. Every month is a snapshot. That is, to me, data. Doesn't tell you anything, but it's the core, it's the ingredients. Once you start comparing these different sheets with another, you can detect how many people did we hire, how many people did we lose, how many people did we lose that we hired in the first 12 months. We call them quick quits or failed hires. So using just payroll data, if I look at it, then I can do a ton of things already. I can calculate the gender pay gap. Why? Because on every salary slip, there is your gender, there's your salary. I know...
And your job title.
And your job title, and your cost center. So with a few ingredients, you can cook a lot of dishes. And people want to see the dishes and not the ingredients.
Yeah, that's a nice one. So one of the things that popped in my mind that others might have the same happening to them is lots of bigger companies are utilizing Workday, SuccessFactors, Oracle, and so on. And I remember from the days that they actually sell their product saying that there's like more than 1,000 standard reporting as part of the package when you do business with them, and that it's super easy to kind of pull reporting from it.
Yeah. That's exactly the problem.
How is it? Yeah, how does it work then with Crunchr? What is the added value, or what is your USP?
Yeah, let us go back to an actual conversation between HR and business. So you're now the business leader, and I'm your HR sidekick. You're the sales leader. And you mentioned that you're not hitting the sales targets, and you want to know, what is happening, because I want to do something about it. HR, please, help me to think this through. Workday is a beautiful system, and so is SuccessFactors and Oracle, and many other systems. But these systems are built as ERP systems, so basically to maintain your processes and capture data. They're not built for reporting and analysis. So therefore, you would have indeed 1,000 reports in Workday. Okay, so now going back to our conversation, and you say, Dirk, all my salespeople are leaving the company because we don't pay enough. And now, being HR, I care for people, but maybe my background is not in mathematics or science. And then I have 1,000 different reports. For me, it's totally unclear which report to use. If I open a report, I sometimes see a list of names, and I'm like,
yeah, and you might not agree, right? It could be that you say they're not leaving because of we don't pay them enough. You're just a lousy manager.
Exactly. So then your question would be, I need a bit of context.
Yeah.
I want to see, the leavers by leave reason. And I want to double click to validate because, which manager is really going to be honest.
And map them against the engagement scores.
Exactly.
And you can combine all the data points together.
Exactly. So now you get another challenge indeed. So imagine that, one day, all these big systems are already promising for 10 years, like, better reporting is coming. But all our clients have the Workdays and they lay a Crunchr on top. So the first challenge is that what the big HR platforms are calling analytics, I call them pie charts, or I call them a list of people that I cannot drill down to, I cannot validate, I cannot build love and trust with my data. The second thing is that when I need the insights, I need to go to 1,000 different reports and I just don't know where to start. And the third challenge is that not all the data is in your Workday because,
some might be in other systems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You would have a recruiting system here, you would have an engagement system there, you would have your sales attainment in that system. It does not come together.
So you pull it all together.
Crunchr pulls basically everything together and creates insights and stories.
So when you look at all these companies that you've been visiting over the last years and working actively with to set this up, is there also a trend of that you see, HR outsourcing, data analyzing, or creating teams internally, or who's analyzing it, who's working with you? What do you see there? So besides the product that you offer, is there anything around it that has changed over time as well?
Yes, quite a bit. So we do 4 things. We bring the data together and store it. We report on it, we analyze it, and we plan. We help you to plan it. And especially in the reporting, we typically work with people operations, HR IT teams for the smaller companies. And they feel the pain. And for them, it's often quite easy because getting a solution in is cheaper than people. I have seen more companies onboarding, more people with a mathematics background into HR. So rather than outsourcing it, they insource it. They start
and hire a total different competency than previously.
Yeah. But now the big challenge is that if you do not have your data all in one place and you have great reporting, and then you bring a data scientist in, then imagine data scientists coming to work at day one. Cool, what are the problems that we're going to work on? Business never comes to us, Okay, well, let me go into the data. Where's the data? Well, it's a bit here, it's a bit there, it's a bit, okay. Well, what are harmonized definitions? Oh, we don't really have definitions. Do we have a governance model that states basically who can access what kind of, we don't really have it. So it all comes into a very logical sequence where first you bring your data together, not in one system, but in a couple of systems. This is typically where you implement your Workday or your SuccessFactors, and where you start to look at an engagement survey.
Doesn't it start with an HR leader that understands the importance of data?
Yes, that has a plan.
Or is it sometimes a CFO that actually starts this discussion?
It's still typically HR that the HR leaders of more progressive companies, or maybe the more progressive HR leaders, they have a plan and they basically see the gap with what they deliver today. So we were working with a very large healthcare company, and this healthcare company said, we know that we are not delivering to where we could deliver to. And for that gap, we do an analysis of, are we going to build or buy? They scan the market and they selected us.
I understand it. Yeah. So you also do subsections, questions. It's not immediately that you need to get into this, to the full suite. You can also come to...
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's a bit why I really believe that people analytics within HR teams should act a bit as startups. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it's quite a new field. You will not get, 20 people budget. So you need to start with something small, show to the business like, hey, this is cool. This could be super powerful. Yeah. And with that, you get a bit more budget or a bit more FTE.
More buy-in.
And you build it out. But it's exactly the same as building a startup.
We're getting a little bit to the end of this podcast episode, Dirk. And I'm just curious also, can you tell us a little bit about the technical side of it? So what platform is it built on, or how did you design it?
Yeah.
The technology side.
Yeah. So in the beginning, this was 2014, 2015, we had to make a big choice. Are we going to build something ourselves, or are we going to build upon, a Power BI, Tableau, ClickView? And we formulated a couple of questions that we wanted to answer. So those questions were leading, and the technology choice was secondary. And what we felt was that building on top of ClickView or building on top of Power BI is almost like you have a square and you try to push a European football through it. It kind of works, but it's so much friction. It is not designed for it. Why? Power BI doesn't understand succession planning. Power BI doesn't understand complex authorizations that we have in HR or GDPR anonymizations. So we decided to build everything ourselves from the ground up. And this is now proprietary to Crunchr. And
did you build it in the Netherlands or in the US?
Everything in Amsterdam.
Everything in Amsterdam?
Yes.
That's quite unique, right?
Yeah, we did not outsource anything. Okay. And I found it really important that the developers and our HR consultants and the people in the sales and marketing teams would lunch together, would sit together, and would...
And these were your own hires as well? You didn't utilize a hub in Poland or something?
No.
Okay. And you still employ them?
Absolutely.
This team, so they're constantly people working on the platform on itself. I assume, how many people work on the tech side of your business?
About 50 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So every week we have 2 releases of Crunchr.
Final questions that I have is around how is it working with HR, selling your product to HR? What is the current situation? And if you had a magic wand, what would you like to change?
Oh, wow. My wish for HR is that they would undergo the same transformation as that finance did, but then in an extremely accelerated way. So in the old days, we called it accounting. Mm-hmm. And there were not many more jobs boring as an accountant. If you look at finance now, we don't call it accounting anymore, we call it finance, and they're all part of the executive committee. They're the most trusted person next to the CEO. And I really want people who lead people and culture and performance to be on the same track, where we don't call them CHROs anymore. I mean, human resources. Come on. Mm-hmm. We call them, chief people, performance and operation and culture officers. Mm-hmm. And my wish for HR is that they could go on an accelerated track. And how to do this is to really deeply understand how the company makes business in a sustainable way. And then translate that into what are the requirements on people, organization, and performance. What are the metrics that we can measure ourselves against? And utilize very modern technology to help accelerate this path. So for example, like any company, we're heavily experimenting with Gen AI. And at the last conferences, we showed our prototype where we can actually have conversations with Crunchr. So I don't need to go anymore to a people analytics or people operations team. I can just say, my manager says everyone is walking away in a sales team because we don't pay enough. Is that true? Boom. Within 10 seconds, you have it. It helps to create stories. It helps to to ask the right questions. So it basically bridges this capability gap. So many people are thinking HR should become more analytical. Mm-hmm. That's not what I would do, because technology will take over. I wish that HR becomes more versed in strategy and consulting. And that is one of the reasons why I'm super passionate about also teaching, at...
Yeah, we haven't talked about that, but
at universities to really build this next generation HR. And the magic wand is basically that HR leaders who maybe take 2 days of pause, really close their eyes and reflect, how can I help my business win? Then reflect on what the whole team is doing every day. And then come to the realization like something has to change.
I'm totally with you on the reflection, as most people know. I'm so keen on getting leaders to understand that taking time out to actually take a moment to reflect, to actually use it as a thinking time, first of all, about where they are, how they are feeling, where they are health-wise, what they are with their mindset, and so on, what they want out of life. But when they start thinking about what's really causing a challenge in my business or in my team and how to solve it, it would be their best time spent. Just sharing the love for HR tech, I have the final question for you, because what we're trying to do with this podcast as well is bridge the gap between HR and tech, but also celebrate the Mavericks, one of them being yourself, for the hard work that you do in the space to actually innovate HR. Is there another HR tech company, so nothing that you have any interest in, but just because of you're watching them or you're following the CEO, that you think is also a very interesting company to look at from a HR tech perspective and making their contributions into this space?
Yeah, I think it would be in the skills space. As you would probably agree with, I mean, HR is in the biggest transformation since the Industrial Revolution, with working from home, robot process automation, the impact of ChatGPT on our work. So the content of work is going to change dramatically. And therefore, I wish HR to have a very good understanding of what skills are required and what skills do we have. And there's two super cool companies in the world that really are pioneers. One is Go Figure. They're all the way in Australia. With a fantastic company founded by Helena Turpin. And the other one is in Belgium. It's called TechWolf by Andreas and a lot of great founding teams.
Super.
And these are passionate entrepreneurs, young, and really making strides in HR.
So we'll mention them in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for flying into Boston, from Boston to Groningen first, and then here to the Netherlands.
Exactly.
Next destination. Lovely meeting you.
Likewise.
In person this time.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Thanks
really loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Meet the Mavericks, an HR tech podcast. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes. And don't forget to listen to our next episode.